All Things Conceivable, a Surrogacy Podcast with Nazca Fontes.
Well, hello, listeners, and welcome to another edition of All Things Conceivable. Today I have an extra special guest that I'll introduce you to in just a moment. But before I do that, I just want to share how I am so grateful every single day and in awe of women who choose to become surrogates. And one of the questions I often get is, what kind of woman exactly chooses to become a surrogate? And in my 3 decades, I can say first and foremost that the kind of woman who becomes a surrogate is an incredibly loving and giving human who simply can't imagine life without a family. She's called to help other people to fulfill their own dreams of creating a family, and she wants them to experience the same joy that she's been able to have in her own family. So that aligns with many communities, and one important community in particular that I want to dive into today is the military spouse community. It's a special community where we find many women who are part of this amazing group of surrogates who also feel the calling to help others build their family. And today, I am so thrilled to introduce to you Tayler Lewis, who is with us. Tayler lives in Florida with, and this is so cute, her high school sweetheart. And she now gets to call him her husband, and she lives with her 2 kids, Maverick and Jovi. Tayler has spent 28 years as a self-proclaimed military brat and 8 years as a military spouse, while her husband Mason was actively serving in the military. And on top of that, she is also super impressive because she has a list of incredibly cool hobbies, including, wait for it, as a licensed skydiver. So this adventure seeker also delivered a surrogate baby in 2022 and is now a proud member of the ConceiveAbilities family as well. So welcome, Tayler. Wow, we are so lucky to have you and to hear you share your empowering story about being a military spouse and a surrogate.
Thank you for having me. I am actually very deeply passionate about both surrogacy and our military, so this makes it my favorite 2 topics to discuss.
Excellent. Well, we have a lot to dive into. So before we do so, I'd love for our listeners to know more about you and your family in particular. Now, I may have misspoken. Maybe Mason wasn't your high school sweetheart, but maybe even goes further back to be your childhood sweetheart. So tell us all about your family.
So I actually studied to be a vet tech, and I had worked with animals for almost 10 years up until the birth of my son. When my husband and I received our first orders as a military family, that was kind of my cue that I think I'm going to stay home with my kids now. So we got our new duty station, and we moved when my son was only a few weeks old. So from there, I raised my babies for about 3 years while I tried to figure out who I was outside of motherhood. It turns out I am actually a lot of fun outside of my more serious parental roles. So I found myself seeking adventure, and I worked towards getting that skydiving license, and I have over 15 jumps. I got to take my son out to the drop zone with me in hopes that he was just going to look back one day and be like, wow, my mom is super cool. But my husband got out of the military about 2 years ago, so we moved down here to Florida just to be closer to family and to finally have some roots planted. My next big adventure was becoming a surrogate, which led me to seek out my role as a surrogate coordinator with ConceiveAbilities. And this way I can continue to fulfill what I believe is my true calling and stay connected to that world of surrogacy.
I love that you have like this adventurous DNA woven into who you are, and you're always seeking to do interesting and exciting things. Surrogacy, of course, being one of those. And I love that you're still discovering who you are beyond your roles as a spouse and mother. It's so empowering. And I think as women, when we get involved in our family lives and we have young children, we're just so busy creating a stable home life for everyone. We often put our own passions and inspirations to the side. And I think it's so important to keep growing and experiencing new challenges. And I love the fact that you're doing just that and cranked up to 11. I mean, skydiving is no easy feat. So let's pivot to the military piece of this. How do you think perhaps being, how the military has played a role in your life in particular?
So I was actually born into the military life. My dad was an engineer in the infantry for 30 years and retired only recently as a colonel. I went straight from being a military brat to being a military spouse, so I'm incredibly blessed that the military has been the very foundation of my life. I got to watch my mom perform the spousal role so effortlessly. You know, she would volunteer at functions on base, she would host spouses at our homes, put together care packages to send to our soldiers overseas, and she would counsel the newer spouses to help them navigate that transition into the military life. And so as a mother now, I'm just so much in awe of her.
So it's incredible that you had this blueprint. And I think for a lot of us who have heard, you know, the proverbial military brat, military spouse, sort of that lifestyle, but haven't actively ever witnessed it up close and personal, it's really interesting to hear you talk about witnessing your mother do this so effortlessly. That's a great phrase, effortlessly, for so many years, because no doubt that was a challenge for her personally, let alone her family. So what a nice role model to have. And now you're able to provide that blueprint and live it for your own kids. So tell me about Mason in particular. Mason's your husband. And how long have you been married? And tell me about Mason's service in the military.
So I married Mason when I was 24 years old. We are going on 7 years this year, next month. But he was a sergeant, and he served as a firearms instructor and a cargo specialist in the Army. He was my very best friend in high school, and I knew he was going to go on and do such great things. So my experience with him as a partner has been incredibly rewarding. I've been able to support all of his achievements and watch him grow from the kids that we were in high school to the remarkable man that he is today. He is such a force and such a safe place, and it has made my role as his partner so easy and so fulfilling. And, you know, honestly, no matter what the military said, I would have followed him anywhere anyways.
Oh, I love this. You know, how about, you've described how the military life for you growing up, you know, how that impacted and what your experience was. But let's dive a little bit deeper and talk specifically about the impact. Like, how has the military, even though you didn't serve yourself, how has it created who Tayler is today and the woman that she is? Let's talk a little bit about that impact of the military.
Sure. So being a military spouse and being part of the military community my entire life has profoundly impacted me in 1,000 positive ways. The military lifestyle taught me patience and unwavering faith, and it inspired me to pursue meaningful opportunities within the community. So through the 15 plus moves that I've made, I learned how to navigate change and to effortlessly form new relationships and new connections. And now that Mason is out of the military and we've settled in our forever state, I deeply value those roots that we've planted here.
And what do you believe is the most empowering moment as a military brat or spouse? You know, can you pinpoint one moment where you said, you know, gosh, this has created the person I am, or this has really shaped my point of view and my values in the world? It sounds like there's many good things, but is there one in particular that you could point to?
So I feel like this is actually going to sound very cliche, and I feel like any military spouse listening to this is going to be like, oh my gosh, that's what I would have said. But my most empowering moment as a military spouse happens every single time we had received orders to move. It was challenging, it was exhausting, but when you say goodbye to the people and the places that you have cherished, you kind of realize how fortunate you are to have loved a community so deeply that leaving was difficult. We had lifelong friends in each state that we always had to say goodbye to, but because of that, we also have friends we get to look forward to when we plan our vacations, to go back to these states and to meet up. And it's just a really big community, and that in itself is so empowering to me.
And the, you know, empowering moments are really good in terms of building resilience, confidence, know-how for the future. Are there any things or any challenges that you can point to as a military spouse where, you know, it was really hard to weather and, you know, maybe I know you've settled now, but where you really never got your bearings, where you felt like, gosh, I'm never going to get used to this. This is the pits. Is there anything like that you can share with us where maybe the other military spouses who are listening might say, oh yeah, I can relate. That's the underbelly of this. That's not so great.
Yeah, so being in a new community, having to relearn your surroundings, rebuild your little village, they say it takes a village, and it feels like every time you finally have one, the military is like, bam, time to move again. Here you go. All of that was very difficult, but the only way that I've learned to navigate that is to just get out there and make yourself known. I remember being young and my parents would send us outside to play so that our neighbors would come out and introduce themselves. And, those were the days where we could knock on someone's door and say, hey, I know you've got kids my age. I was wondering if they could come out and play. And I feel like you kind of have to transition that into your adulthood and be like, I'm here, I'm new, I need community. What are you into? I'm into the same things. Let's get together. Let's have play dates. It's really just a matter of making yourself known so that you're not doing it alone.
That's very good wisdom to share. Now let's talk about you mentioned the kids, sending them out to play. How about Maverick and Jovi? How has being in the military impacted how you raise them through all these transitions?
Oh my gosh, my children, and I get goosebumps every time I get to speak about my children, but they would stand still and they would honor the reveille, retreat, and taps that they would play over the base, with their hands over their heart. And that always, for some reason, just makes me so, so proud. It's empowering to know that Mason and I have raised them to be patriotic and supportive and to understand the importance of the sacrifices that have been made. So their attentiveness and their respect just affirm that they are watching and that they are learning from everything that we do.
And do you think that you could tie together your experience in the military, both as a child growing up within that framework and as a spouse, to what we like to call, a purpose or a calling when it comes to being a surrogate? Do you think that there's a connection to why you chose to be a surrogate and your experience in the military? Because we do get a lot of military spouses as surrogates.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. The word that you hear over and over, and I think you've already used, is resilience, and it truly is fitting. As a military family, we have the ability to adapt to new and forever changing situations. There's this fearlessness that you have to have in order to embrace the demands of the military, whether it's a new duty station, saying goodbye to the community that you just spent 3 years getting to know so well, or taking on that role as the primary parent when your spouse gets called on to serve away from home. It's tough. And as a military spouse, I think that we tend to resonate with words like serve and calling and purpose. So we may not serve in the same capacity as our active duty partners, but we strive to make a difference, So that can look like volunteering, engaging in our community, supporting others as they navigate the challenges of military life. But when we take action, we are also on a mission. We truly believe that we are fulfilling an important purpose. And military spouses are known for their resourcefulness, for creating strategies, for executing plans. So we have this I will go demeanor. Our active duty counterparts live and breathe I will go. And I just think that surrogacy provides us with a similar sense of calling.
I love that. And how about being, obviously a military spouse can be challenging, being a surrogate can be challenging, and you need to find your community. Do you have any, and we're going to talk about the surrogate community in a minute, but before we wrap up the military piece, if you were to provide a piece of advice or a set of counsel to a new military spouse, what might that be?
I can confidently say that every time a military spouse counsels or advises a newer spouse, it's a victory. Not everyone was born into the military life like I was, so I find fulfillment in guiding others and offering support as they weather their new normal. So holding their hand through these transitions, allowing them to share, wisdom with each other and the resilience that we've all gained from our own experiences, I think that is the most important. I think that it is very important to find someone who has been in a similar situation and just have a buddy to kind of talk about it with and to guide you, whether they're more experienced or you're more experienced. Sometimes I find myself counseling someone and learning from myself in that moment.
How about when you knew finally that you and Mason were going to transition out of military life? We're going to kind of sunset that part of you that was, from the cradle, right? The military life was yours from the cradle, and now you needed to make the transition to civilian life. Share a little bit about that transition with our listeners. I'm sure, they're very interested to know how you made such a transition and finally put down roots.
So that was scary. That was not easy at all because I've been accustomed to one lifestyle since the day I was born. But I think that there's a sense of security when you live on a military base and when your neighbors know the ins and outs of that lifestyle. I do feel as though once we found our people here, our church home, and of course being close to my parents, it gave us that sense of community back that we are, in desperate need of. And the transition isn't easy, but truly we are loving every minute of it now because we have gone and we have sought out that community that we just had such a hard time leaving behind in the military.
And when you finally decided to be a surrogate, when, this idea started to kind of grow and you were thinking about it, were you still, was your husband still actively serving? Were you an active military spouse, or had you already transitioned to civilian life?
So we were just about to transition to civilian life. He was probably due to get out a year after I had started the surrogacy screening process. And after our daughter was born, I just, we had so many conversations about this and I knew it's what I wanted to do. He was very supportive, very on board with it. And he happened to get out about a year in. So we were still doing the formal paperwork, but I wasn't pregnant until he had already gotten out.
And can you share with us what it was that planted the seed that grew into this calling for you? Like, what was it where you finally said, because you just mentioned you knew this was something you wanted to do, but at some point the seed must have been planted for it to grow. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it was multiple seeds. The high school that Mason and I went to, I specifically remember a morning coming into school and the teacher was just so upset. You could tell she had been crying. She wasn't herself. And she kind of elaborated that, a couple of classes before then that they had been trying to conceive and she had a really difficult time doing so. So that morning was the result of another negative pregnancy test for her. And so that kind of stuck with me. And then I had a friend that I knew in high school who went on to be a surrogate, and I watched her journey and I just thought that is so neat. That is so selfless. I love that about her. I followed her entire journey, and now one of my very best friends, she struggled with infertility for 8 years, and when I applied to a job, I was about 8 months pregnant with my surrogate baby, and I was like, no one is going to hire me. I am about to pop. I don't know who is going to accept this. And I interviewed with her, and she told me, she was like, we have struggled with infertility and I think the world of you because of what you're doing. I was very open and honest and upfront about the surrogacy journey, and that was part of the reason that we had bonded so quickly and so well. And she told me, she was like, you go give birth to that baby, you recover, and you come back when you're ready, I want you. So a lot of seeds were planted, and I think that giving birth to my daughter and knowing that we were complete, one boy, one girl, this is it for us. I could not shake that feeling of, gosh, I don't want to not do this again, but I'm also not wanting to expand my own family. What can I do? And so that was the seal. That is what decided it for me. I was like, I am absolutely going to do this.
Excellent. And of course, we're so pleased and honored that you did. Why don't you share a little bit about that journey and what it was like for you?
Oh, the journey, gosh, if my body would allow me to do this 1,000 more times, I absolutely would. It was, and I know not everyone's journeys are perfect, but I felt like mine was as perfect could have been. And I met with this amazing couple. My husband and I we loved them so much, and it was very easy. We were very confident in this decision to go forward. And my surrogate baby was actually born in the middle of a hurricane. So the family had come down here to see the birth of their daughter, and in the middle of a hurricane, we were all rushing into the hospital, and now we call her Hurricane Hazel. And, we've got a wonderful, wonderful relationship with them. They send little care packages to my children. We get to meet up every now and then, and recently we were on a trip for work over in Chicago, and I got to meet up with them for a couple hours and just hang out, and the relationship is everything I could have wanted and more.
Well, everybody's favorite moment of a surrogacy journey is, of course, the delivery story, right? That's the penultimate moment of the entire process, the moment everybody waits for. Why don't you share your delivery story with us?
Sure. like I said,
other than the hurricane.
Yeah, we were preparing for the hurricane. But the doctors actually think that it might have been the pressure changes of the hurricane that had popped my water. So we all met up they had been in town for about 2 weeks, and we were just kind of prepping, and we all met up at the hospital, and we got to share a room with them. And the delivery is just, it's beautiful, and I get goosebumps talking about it, because there is a very specific moment that I remember. And right before the baby was born, the intended father leaned over and he put his hand on my arm, and he just looked me straight in my face and he said, "Thank you. Thank you for doing this." And so we're all, ugly crying as this baby's being born. We're all ugly crying. And once they handed the baby over to the intended mother, then, we all just kind of sat there and locked hands. And I've got this beautiful photo of all three of us holding hands, and the dad's just profusely thanking me, and the mom is crying, and this baby she's just so beautiful. And my husband's on the other side of me. All of us got to be in the room. My husband's on the other side of me, and my biggest support system throughout the whole thing. And, he's like rubbing my hair and my head and telling me, "Good job, you did it. You're so powerful. You're so strong. I'm so proud of you." And so all around, the birth was fairly quick. And it was magical.
Well, magical is the perfect descriptor, right? Because there's nothing more powerful that bonds humans together than being in that moment when you're welcoming a new life into the world. And it's one thing to have, a husband and wife delivering their own baby, but when you're able to do it for someone else and you're all in there sharing that moment together, magical is the word that is used most often, truly. And, your story is a beautiful one, and I know it's an inspirational one to our listeners. You mentioned the word support. Of course, your husband's going to support you, and I love this support that your intended father, gave you in that moment. How important was the support for you? Who gave it to you most? Where did you find it? Where did you draw from? And where did you maybe expect it where you didn't receive it?
I felt beyond supported throughout this journey. Not only was my husband on board with it and, supportive since the beginning, but I live now near my family, and my family would watch my children for me when I had appointments. And I feel like all you can ask for is support in this journey. No one wants to go at any of this alone. You want to know that you have people to talk to, and that people are going to uplift you during the process. And I had that from friends. I had that from work, from my parents, and the church, and just I have felt so supportive. I never really ran into negativity or not feeling unsupported. I just ran into a lot of why? Like, why would you do this? Why do you want to do this? What is the reason? So aside from the whys, everyone around me was supportive, and it was wonderful. I think that the most you can ask for is just that your support person, Mason being my biggest support, just that they're on board and that they hear you and they listen to you. And, these guys can't possibly understand physically what you're going through, but to be able to have someone to sit down with at night and to have a meal with and to discuss how you're feeling and where your mental state is at, all of that is incredibly important. And a lot of that is offered, through ConceiveAbilities. You have your support groups, and I think that makes a world of a difference as well.
Support's so important for a successful journey. Absolutely. From all parts of your life. Family, coworkers if you're employed, your children, and certainly the agency. I think, that multifaceted support system always makes for a successful journey. No person can go it alone in a surrogacy journey. I also find it very interesting about the reaction from some of the people that you shared this with, and the curiosity of why would you do this? I find that there's three camps generally when people respond to the idea of surrogacy. There are the curiosity seekers who say, "Oh, tell me more about that. I'm so intrigued. I've heard about it, but I've never met a surrogate before." Then there's the camp that will outright question the decision. Why would you do something like that? I just don't understand it. And then there are those that are wired for surrogacy, right? Where it becomes this light bulb moment, this watershed moment where they say, "Wow, that's amazing. I could see myself doing that. I really want to learn more about it." And it is a calling for women like that. As soon as they hear about it, it's almost immediate. Now, they have to think about it for a while, but the idea immediately resonates with them. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
I mean, there's no naysaying. It's right away like, I could see myself doing that. Mm-hmm. So tell me why you chose ConceiveAbilities as your surrogacy agency in particular.
So ConceiveAbilities was not only filled with selfless women on a mission to build families, but they also offered the most incredible support system, and I could not have asked for better. The women understood the journey, both as mothers and as military spouses, and so it provided me with a sense of camaraderie and encouragement that I believe made the entire difference.
Now, one of the questions that folks ask naturally, they get curious about the compensation. And naturally, all of us who are in this world know that the financial aspect is not a primary motivator by any stretch of the imagination. But it's a nice to have. It's a secondary component to surrogacy. And we've heard from many women who are military spouses that becoming a surrogate is something they can fulfill while also contributing financially to their family, even if they move around a lot. Do you want to speak to the financial component of surrogacy at all?
Absolutely. I mean, we are called as partners to support our spouses, and contributing financially made me feel like I was able to take some of those pressures off of my husband. And, through surrogacy, you don't have to put in your 2 weeks notice and then spend hours updating your resume to apply somewhere brand new at your next duty station. We build these resumes to prove our worth, like why hire me? What makes me stand out? Why me over someone else? But with surrogacy, you're validated, you're needed, you're wanted, and incredibly worthy. It's very challenging as a military spouse to have to pack up and start over. And I just think that surrogacy really gives you that option to go with the flow and to contribute and to be supportive as a partner.
What an excellent way to frame that. I could not have said that any better, Tayler. That's terrific. I love it. I love it. Maybe I can ask a bit of a personal question. What did you and your family do with the compensation? Did you set it aside for educational purposes? Did you use it for a home? In what way did it positively impact your life?
So our original plan was to use it for a home, and then we just got really comfortable renting. So right now, our money has been used to put my children both into a wonderful private school system, and so our money has gone towards that. We did move just into a bigger rental, and it allowed for us to, take care of that. We were able to get another car because we were kind of sharing one briefly after our military move. But it's helped us in a lot of financial ways. And then, just to have that cushion of savings, the savings that was never really there before the journey.
That's excellent. So you used it in a variety of ways that were helpful to you, but not life-altering, right? Just helpful. You've made the transition to employment with ConceiveAbilities, and we couldn't be more thrilled. I mean, simply any listener right now would know how much you resonate with potential surrogates who have a lot of questions and want to learn more and are looking for camaraderie and, that connection that someone gets me, right? She gets me. She understands why I want to do this. So you've made this now a career of helping other women learn about surrogacy in your job. Have you met with other military spouses who are also considering becoming a surrogate in your line of work with us?
Oh, absolutely. Helping build families as a military spouse, a surrogate, and an employee with ConceiveAbilities has been a very deeply personal way for me to serve others. I meet applicants all the time now who share the lifestyle that I experienced for 28 years, and so now I have the privilege of guiding them through that screening process as one of the first people that they get to connect with on their journeys. So beyond my professional role, I get to be a friend to these women. I get to offer advice and support with a sense of empathy and understanding because I've walked a similar path.
I also think that a lot of military spouses who consider becoming a surrogate worry that because of the transitional lifestyle, because of this degree of uncertainty that can kind of run through their lives, that surrogacy might not be the right option for them, that it's too much to juggle. What might you say about that point of view?
I would say do your research, have that conversation with your partner. If it's something that sits on your heart every single night, the way that it did on mine, pursue it. Apply and find out if you qualify to be a surrogate, and let that excitement take you to the end. It's a beautiful and rewarding journey, but it takes that first step, to keep the motivation going. So if my experiences as a military spouse and surrogate could offer any kind of encouragement to others that are trying to find confidence in their own purpose, then I will have fulfilled my own calling.
One thing we didn't quite touch on is Maverick and Jovi's, point of view about your surrogacy, how they reacted to this, and what they thought about you being pregnant and not coming home with a baby. Tell us a little bit and share with our listeners how you coached them through the idea of surrogacy.
So there is a lot of material out there on kind of how to guide these conversations and to navigate this with your children. And my youngest was just too young to understand. I don't think she even understands it at this point. But my older one was 4 when I started the journey. And, he and other kids in his class, when I would go to pick him up, would be like, your mommy has a baby in her belly. And, are you having a brother? Are you having a sister? And we kind of explained it to him by saying, this is a gift. My love language is gift giving, and we are giving this gift to her mom and dad. And he knew that it wasn't a sibling. He knew it was a baby that we were not going to keep. And I think that he grasps just the basics of that. And now that he's older, he knows, Hazel is our surrogate baby. Hazel is a part of the family, but not within our bloodline. And I think that it's exciting for children, like when there's a new baby, whether it's yours or not. So the fact that our intended family was able to bring her over to the house and introduce her to my children after the birth kind of gave my kids that closure, I think, that they needed.
That's beautiful. And it's so true, right? Children are a gift. And this is the ultimate gift. It's the ultimate gift. Your story is so insightful, and you're so smart, you're so articulate, you're just so joyful to listen
Thank
to.
you.
I wish I could talk to you forever, and I know our listeners, I'm sure, are riveted. Do you feel that there's anything that we haven't touched upon that you really want to share with our listeners?
All I can say is that this was nothing I ever, woke up and said, when I'm older, that's what I'm going to do. My aha moments happened a little later on in life. But I feel like any thought on surrogacy, anytime you sit there and you think, well, maybe, that is an aha moment. And I think that as long as you pursue that, and as long as you take the steps to figure out what comes next, you're already headed in the right direction. And I think that going to bed every single night and knowing I did what I could, I am helping a family, grow, I'm making these progressions, all of that is so empowering. And if I could just bottle up that feeling and keep that in my pocket forever, I would, and I would hand it out to every single person that I passed on the street.
And we'd be happy if you did so. Our mission as an organization, right, is to build as many healthy, happy families as possible. There are so many intended parents that are so deserving, and to be matched with a woman like you is just, it's a miracle. And you have done something profound that will never be forgotten. So thank you for the inspirational story. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for the experience shares for our listeners. I have no doubt that you will be guiding many of them through their own surrogacy journey in the future. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tayler.
Thank you, Nazca.
Well, was that not an inspirational story or what? What an incredible lady. And we're so privileged to have her connecting with and speaking to other potential surrogates in our organization. And, as I was listening to her story, what resonated most deeply with me in particular was this notion of, service and purpose and calling. And time and again, that is what surrogates relate to us as to why they make the overture, take that step to consider surrogacy and move forward on a journey. They really feel called. They feel that it is part of their purpose. And, we can connect that sense of purpose to all kinds of things in our lives. It doesn't have to be through the military or through surrogacy. It can be through our volunteer life. It could be through our career path. It could be through our support of our friendships and our loved ones. But I think that when we move forward and listen to our purpose and our calling, that's when magical things happen. And magical in the sense of, what Tayler described to us as that moment in the delivery room. So I really resonate with this idea and this notion of purpose and a calling. In all facets of our lives, we should listen to that clearly, because that's what's going to motivate us to do magical things in our lives. And for those of you who are considering surrogacy, we are also ready and willing to support you in that calling. So thank you, listeners. And until next time, have a wonderful day.
At ConceiveAbilities, we believe that everyone who wants to become a parent can. Our agency has helped build thousands of families for nearly 25 years. Whether you are an intended parent ready to fulfill your family destiny, a surrogate answering your calling, or an egg donor wanting to expand what's possible in your life, we are your people. See how matching matters. Learn more by joining our Surrogacy Learning Center community at surrogacylearningcenter.conceivabilities.com.